Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm Abercrombie and Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It's not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast.
Good morning or afternoon. I guess it's morning here. It's morning here for me, morning here for you. I guess we're in the Central Time Zone. Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Abercrombie. With me, as always, is the other host. Couldn't do it without him, Sam Sanchez. Sam, how you doing?
Good, Bryan. Good, glad to be here.
How's the
Pac-Man to your candy bar, man? Yeah, exactly.
How's the snowpocalypse going?
Yeah, luckily not as bad as last year. Obviously, we did get quite a good dusting, and it's freaking frigid cold.
Yeah, we got no snow, but it's 28 degrees outside. It's super chilly.
Yeah, we're super chilly too. We did get a good dusting though. We got the cobblestone ice.
So based on kind of our own evaluation of this podcast, we've been on hiatus for a little while, but based on our own kind of evaluation of our podcast and kind of where we're going for the future, I think we decided to make a couple of changes. Sam, do you want to enlighten us on the changes, or do you want me to tell it?
No, I'm totally good with it. I think that, obviously we spent a lot of time talking about very specific legal issues related to not just family law, business law, estates planning, probate, kind of the areas of law that we touch on in our firm. But we also have very strong opinions about obviously things that are just happening in our world. And while we still will obviously bring the insight and intelligence that our law degrees and our experience in the legal field has given us, we're really looking to expand the topics that we talk about and touch on to just things that are important and relevant to us in our lives and to the people that we believe are listening, and hopefully get some good information and some good talking points.
Yeah, and like I said, we want to touch on, we'll bring up, we'll cover family and probate and business law issues when they come up and stuff like that. But we want to touch on topics that we think are, going to be that people want to hear about. So, we obviously have opinions about different things. So we're going to share those opinions, and we're also going to, share topics of the day and, welcome comments. If people want to comment and say how wrong we are, whatever, then go right ahead. We're happy to have a discourse.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that being said, let's jump into our first topic. So I was talking about, we both live here in Texas, and Texas is obviously a border state. We've had a number of problems with the border this year. I don't think that's I think everybody can agree that there's problems down there. I guess the, discussion points and the solution, right? Or lack thereof. But bottom line is we've had a massive amount of border problems this year. I think the influx of illegal immigrants coming across the border is somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 million this year, from what they know of. And what they're doing with them after they come across the border is also another bone of contention. But, I saw this video that this guy went down. I guess there's a butterfly sanctuary on the border between, Del Rio there and, coming down the Rio Grande. The environmentalists have, designated an area that they believe to be a butterfly sanctuary, and they were all upset about the wall being built across the butterfly sanctuary. But apparently, the wall wasn't built there. Obviously, the wall was stopped when Trump left office. So they're using the area around the butterfly sanctuary as the, ingress point for, illegal aliens coming across the border, and it looks to be, trafficked children and, just a terrible, terrible situation. And I don't think they intended for the butterfly sanctuary to be used as as the route for a rat line coming across the U.S. Mexico border, right?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think so. And obviously, both being Texas, I grew up on a ranch, that ran across the Texas-Mexico borderline, or a large portion of that ranch did. And so, we had a lot of experience with, coyotes and drug trafficking and law enforcement and all the issues that brings up in relation to what, and it was obviously a microcosm as opposed to what we're dealing with in this macro situation across the country. And it's a very challenging situation because obviously, when you look at, you'll hear people say, well, immigrants are, these illegal immigrants are a large reason for our population having issues. And there are a lot of them, obviously. We do have, obviously much higher rates of crime along the border based on these situations and who's coming over. In the same token, I will tell you that, when you look at our country, and let's just take the state of Texas, a large majority of the people who are coming over, it's not like they're coming over to perpetrate crime. These are people who are coming over to really work and to try to make money. And most of that money doesn't stay in the United States. It gets sent back home to people that are still wherever they came from. Now, and these are jobs that I would tell you, like, it's not like we're sitting there going like, hey, these are the jobs you and I want. Or, the jobs that people are graduating college and saying, hey, these are the things I want to do. I want to go dig post holes or dig ditches or whatever it is. But the challenge is that it is a strain on our resources. It's a strain financially on the state as far as like, how do we provide for the children who are coming across, right? So like, if we catch them, we're holding them at the moment. Our political strategy is super interesting.
I guess we're not holding them. is what the problem is.
Well, right. So like, we're like, hey, just let them go free. Okay, well then they can't register for school, or if they do register for school, the school isn't getting any type, because the way we fund schools for the most part in Texas is through property taxes. Okay, and so the property and corporate taxes, business taxes, all contribute towards how we are going to pay for schools.
I pay a lot of them. I pay a lot of them.
Right? Yeah, the first year always sucks for both. But I will tell you that when you look at that situation and you talk about children coming in, how do we provide any type of support for them? Because we can't anticipate. It's this huge flood of children who are coming in without parents, right? So whether they're being trafficked, so now they're in this sex trafficking, rings that are huge in the state of Texas right now. There's always these kind of huge, massive busts, and most of them are made up of illegal children, right? Illegals come over, they don't have any type of support. So they try to like, hey, is the state going to take care of me? No, these individuals are easy prey for kind of the criminal underworld that's waiting for them when they come across the border. If not, the people who bring them over.
If it's not happening while they're being, trafficked across the border.
Absolutely.
That's another big problem. They've got, children, as young as 3 and 4 years old being smuggled across that border, and who knows what life they're going into. You're absolutely right.
And so that really becomes this huge, it's like the tip of the iceberg when we start talking about the conversation of, illegal immigration. And it's a complicated issue, right? Because you're not just talking about the economic impact, you're talking about the socioeconomic impact, right? Because, a big portion, like right now we're in an election year. So you could turn on the TV, turn on the radio, all you're hearing is political ads, right? And a big piece of the political ad structure right now is people talking about, hey, we're going to keep illegals out. Like our focus is to build a wall or do whatever the hell you think that's going to work, which by the way, the wall, Brian, let's give me a freaking break, man. A wall, like that is not going to stop people from coming in, but whatever, if it makes us feel better and sleep better at night, let's build a freaking castle at the corner. I'm just telling you that, as human trafficking is existing in our country, it comes from all ports. It comes from all sides. And, in Texas, we get to look at it and say, well, along our border, it's either going to come seaside, right? Down the Houston area, down Channel. It's going to come across the Rio Grande. It's going to come under or over the fence. If we think that the fence is secure, we're fooling ourselves. But here's the deal behind that. So like we invest millions to defend it, right? We invest millions to try to set up a structure. We invest millions to hire more Border Patrol, DEA, troopers, whoever it is, local law enforcement to be able to try to stem the tide. And the challenge that we have is it's so overwhelming. We've got thousands upon thousands of individuals crossing that border at any given point in time. So, it's gonna have to be, in my opinion, more than just a law enforcement issue. It really becomes a socioeconomic issue. And how do we deal with what's on the other side to keep them from wanting to come over here? We can't subsidize Mexico, Guatemala, all the Latin American countries and say, hey, we give you a bunch of money, keep your people there. It's just not gonna work.
The other problem is you have the illegal, the drug cartel element. I mean, they're making a fortune, forcing, I mean, they've got armbands for people coming across the border. So I guess they know which cartel, owns them, so that, and they're paying them money to take them across the border. And, that's a very, very lucrative business. From what I've read in some of the articles I've looked at, it's more lucrative than transporting drugs across the border. The transporting people across the border makes more money than the drug trade.
Yeah, because it brings money back, right? Yeah.
I mean, the amount of fentanyl alone that's being transported across the border is enough to kill, who knows how many people. But I agree with you. I mean, I don't know that the wall is necessarily an answer. It's a combination problem, right? It's, multiple problems on both sides of the border. It's got, a law enforcement element, a people element, a socioeconomic element. I don't think a wall hurts. I think it does provide some deterrence. It's not the only thing. I mean, because they're going to find ways around, ways under, ways over. So you have to have an increased presence on the border. Does that mean more Border Patrol agents? I guess, but the policy has to change too. I mean, you're talking about Border Patrol agents who catch these people, and what do? They're told to let them go, and then if they're lucky, maybe they have a court date in 3 years. Right. They might have a deportation hearing in 3 years.
Completely backed up. Then everybody has.
This is going to blow your mind. The Biden administration has a policy where if you come across the border and you're illegal, and you have minor children down in Guatemala or El Salvador or Mexico, even, the federal government will pay to fly your kids up to you in the U.S., which is absolutely, and it blows my mind. That blows my mind. I mean, I understand people not wanting to be with their kids, and I'm not, taking that lightly, but at the same time, I mean, maybe coming across the border is not the best thing.
No, it's absolutely not. And, the challenge is obviously you have, Trump's policies, you have Biden's policies. First it's that we're going to ship you back. Then it's no, we're not going to hold you. We're going to hold you. We're not going to ship you back. We're going to figure out, maybe, do we allow them to apply for asylum? What do those rules look like? You've got these, immigration courts that are hearing these, requests, these petitions to stay that are years backed up. Then you have the pandemic on top of it. So then you're like, hey, what do we do with that? I mean, the challenge becomes, I think, as a society, is very little about, right? So what they do is they take this position, well, I don't think illegal aliens should come over, period. Okay, so let's do whatever we need to keep them out. Great. So we're going to increase your taxes so that we can pay for these things. Well, wait a minute, I don't want to pay more taxes. I just want it to happen. Well, what do you want us to do? Well, can we deploy the military? Well, no, we're not going to deploy the military along, do you think Governor Abbott is going to say, hell yeah, bring the federal law, federal troops into the state of Texas to patrol the border? No way.
Or the National Guard. I mean, he can deploy the National Guard, but how much money does it cost to keep the National Guard down there year-round?
Exactly. There's no way he's going to do it. It's political suicide. But it's a topic that every politician, at least in the state of Texas, is absolutely looking to use, right?
I
saw
a political ad of George P. Bush, that's George W.'s nephew, so Jeb's son, who's running for attorney general. I guess he's riding a four-wheeler or something down along the border.
Talk about a douchebag, dude. I'm like, what? Like, give me a freaking break. Dude. Like, you're gonna go patrol the borderline on your four-wheeler? Yeah, I'd love it. That's our attorney general dude on his four-wheeler with his sunglasses, patrolling the freaking border wall. I was like, whoever thought that was a smart idea was a terrible, terrible, terrible advice. But I get it. I get the issue.
They're all running out there because it's an election year. Everybody's running out there saying how tough they're going to be on the border, but then nothing ever happens and nobody ever does anything. And it's on both sides. It's on both sides. It's Republicans and Democrats. I mean, the Democrats are just doing it faster. The Republicans pay lip service. At least pay lip service to want to do something about it. but nobody's getting, if everybody wanted to do something about it, something would have gotten done.
100%, brother. You're 100% right. And that's exactly where I was going, because here's the deal. What you're talking about is money, right? The heart of that issue is cash money. These people,
Right.
they're worth cash to the cartels. They're worth cash to the coyotes. They're worth cash to businesses on the other side that are paying them pennies on the dollar what they would pay an American worker, right?
Yep.
Now, is all that illegal? Yes. Are people making money on it? Hand over fist. And so do you think that money doesn't reach, I would love to tell you that every law enforcement officer out there is just and true and above corruption. That's just not the case. They're human beings. They're taking payoffs from the cartel. They're taking payoffs from businesses to look the other way. These are all things, because guess what? Even if they wanted to try to take a stand, they're one of 1,000 that they can't. What difference can they make? There's this huge flood, and they're basically holding a finger in the dike that's already leaking everywhere. So, I understand the challenges of it, but really at the heart of this issue, and you and I both know it, it's money. It's money. And if you're going to stem the flow of money, then you're going to have a lot of pissed off people on both sides. And that's why people talk about it, but do very little about it.
I mean, my bigger concern, I have two big concerns on this, is one, you cease to have sovereignty as a country when you have no border. And basically we have no border at this point. Mm-hmm. There's so many people coming across. I mean, for every 10 people they catch, there's probably 200 people that get through.
Oh yeah.
And so we have no functioning border at this point. But the federal government's not willing to do anything about it. And the state government's, willing, they might do something. It's limited what they can even do. It's really a border patrol issue, but there's not enough border patrol agents, and they don't get the support. They get harangued if they make an arrest and it looks bad on TV. Oh, yeah. And that's a hard job to do, and that's a risky job to do. And would you want to live down across that border and have to live in those towns and to work that border patrol job, which is, yeah, you got to run the risk of being brought up on, federal charges for making an arrest, these days,
or getting shot by the cartel because you get in the way, right? You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
you're just one agent, and they don't care. I mean,
yeah, and you're probably running a stretch of
for the money. And there was an ex-border patrol guy that's become a big advocate, and he was talking about one girl that was trafficked across the border, and she had DNA in her from 20 different people. And that's a heartbreaking story. And she was a minor, minor, 12, 13 years old. I don't remember what the age was, but it was significantly young. And the human trafficking is just an absolute tragedy. And I understand that, that America was a land that was made on immigrants. Hell, my family was immigrants, your family was immigrants, everybody just about coming over here was an immigrant at some point. I get that, but at the same, and most of them are looking for a better life, looking for a better, better way to make money and stuff like that. But then there's this other element that, they have to get involved with some pretty seedy individuals to get across that border. And that includes drug cartels. I mean, the drug cartels have a business going. I mean, you get your wristband, you pay your money, and they take you across. And they know exactly how the system works. They're very smart, very savvy business people. It's evil, don't get me wrong, but they know what they're doing, and they're making a lot of money off of it. And like I said, the worst thing ever is the trafficking element of it. I mean, that's just absolutely heartbreaking. And then when they come across the border, what I don't understand is they're rounding over. It's this catch and release thing that they got going, but then they're taking them in buses or taking them in planes and dropping them off. Every town's a border town. I mean, they're dropping people off in New Hampshire, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. I mean, I don't understand why that's. I understand from the standpoint of the Biden administration doesn't want it to look bad, so they don't want a bunch of people all situated along the border, so they're trying to spread them out. But I mean, there's got to be some better solution than, we're just going to go to Wilkes-Barre, Connecticut, and drop a bunch of people off.
Yeah.
In the middle of the night, so nobody knows what's going on. Isn't that kind of participating in the human trafficking?
Yeah, I agree. I think they absolutely are. And the problem is there's no cohesive strategy because there's no cohesion in this country on this issue. There really isn't, Brian. The challenge is you talk to border states, and border states are like, frickin', we need a wall. We need to keep them out. They're like destroying the kind of fabric of, our socio and political and financial systems, right? They're overwhelming, state agencies like CPS, Child Protective Services. They're overwhelming, welfare systems within the state. They're overwhelming, these educational systems that, nobody can afford to do anything because we have this huge influx of children. So nobody can really teach because the classrooms are so big, and half of them are having to be taught in, ESL classes, which is basically English as a second language class. And so you have to have
Right.
very specialized teachers. So it's just this huge pressure. But the challenge is that you talk to somebody in Ohio and they give a shit. They kind of look at it and they're like, hey, guess what? That's not my freaking problem. Until,
hey, but every town's a border town now, though.
That's right, because guess what? In Ohio, that's where freaking like the cartel's dropping people off. But when you look at these large farming communities, these like, even let's use California. California is a great example of this, because California has this huge influx of freaking illegals all the time. And guess
every
what?
year to farm those fruit crops.
Absolutely. Florida is the same way. And so Texas has a big part of that as well. There's these areas where ranchers, farmers are looking at it going like, I don't want them, but I need them, right? And so how do we keep them out? I want the good ones. I sure as hell don't want the shitty ones. I don't want to have this drug trafficking or this, human trafficking rings go on a cohesive immigration strategy, which means that there is a pathway to get into this country. But right now, because the floodgates are freaking open, why do you even have to focus on that? Because you're like, try to get here legally? What are you worried about? Just freaking cross the border, fly in, never leave, because they're not going to kick you out.
And then we're in this heightened COVID environment, so nobody's getting vaccinated, nobody's getting tested. Then these kids are coming to schools with no vaccinations. Not to take the COVID vaccination out of it, take the measles, mumps, rubella vaccinations. They don't even have those. So you're talking about an influx of disease, and you can't really turn these kids away from an education. I mean, it's free public school. So it's a massive problem, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. I mean, you want politicians to not to pay it lip service and actually work on solutions to the problem. I mean, it's a complicated problem, so it's going to require a combination of solutions. If that means more temporary work visas or more things, that's one thing. But there's also going to have to be, an influx of criminal investigations and law enforcement along the border, and there might be a need for a border wall and things like that. There's no easy solutions, and I have a feeling it's a complicated, multifaceted solution, and it's going to require every side to give a little.
No, hell yeah. Well, and not only that, Brian. So like when people say, hey, well, it's because there's this huge criminal element coming across. There is a huge criminal element coming across. Absolutely, without a doubt. Look at our prisons. If you look at the prison system, like these are getting swelled with criminals that are coming from other countries, because other countries are like, hey, you know what, criminal, we'd love for you to go someplace where there's probably easy pickings and more money. Guess where that is? It's here. So
you got
MS-13. Yeah, you got MS-13. You got the cartels. You got all these people who are saying like, hey, if we can establish a criminal enterprise foothold in the States where now we have it on both sides, that's what we want. And that's what they're doing. And so, so you talk to law enforcement, you talk to, people who are involved in this day-to-day struggle, and they absolutely want change, but talk to them about solutions to that problem. And it's incredibly complicated. It's not just the law. It's not just, politics. It's really the everyday person. And the everyday person right now kind of turns the other cheek. They kind of look at it and go, oh yeah, it's a terrible problem. And, I'll vote for somebody and they'll take care of it. Well, guess what? That's not the solution. Voting somebody in to think like, hey, that one person or this, 100 people are going to make the change that's going to make it, fix the problem is not it. It's really going to have to take, the population as a whole to kind of resolve that situation. In my opinion, we're just not ready to do it.
No, I mean, I do think when Trump was in office, I'd read somewhere that about 90% of the problem was starting to be solved, but it's still 10% of the problem there. There's still a minimum of 10%, and then now it's gone 180 in the opposite direction. So it's probably twice what the original problem was. So, all right, I think we've tackled that issue. If you have a comment about that issue or something we want to address, we'll take it up in the next episode. Just send us a comment. Give us 4 stars if you want to review us, and then give us your comment. We're happy to take questions, happy to discuss it. I mean, we have opinions. We're not always right. We're not always wrong. And, we're willing to listen. So the next thing on the agenda is, this hits really close to home. This is obviously a legal topic. So we're talking about an election year. We're talking about a recent Court of Appeals ruling. So just to give listeners a little bit of background, the Court of Criminal Appeals is the highest court in the state of Texas for criminal matters. And so it's basically the Supreme Court, but for criminal matters. So the Supreme Court of Texas deals with civil matters, and the Court of Criminal Appeals deals with the criminal cases. So there was a criminal case that came up, and it was dealing with the voter fraud issue. And it was decided, oddly, coincidentally, I don't really necessarily believe in coincidences anymore, but coincidentally, sorry, my kids and dog may be in the background.
It's all
but
good,
anyway,
man. It's our world, man. It's what we're living in. Love
anyway, one day after the filing deadline for filing for new candidates to run for the judicial offices of, for the next election, the Court of Appeals, which is controlled by the Republican Party, decided 8-1 to refuse to allow the Texas Attorney General to prosecute voter fraud. So the Texas Attorney General at this present time could no longer enforce voter fraud. So you're asking, where does voter fraud get prosecuted now? Well, it gets prosecuted by your local district attorney. So this is an extremely controversial decision. I mean, my personal opinion is, you've got the district attorney in Harris County, Dallas County, and Bexar County, for one. They all get money from Soros. They all get money from the George Soros, funded PACs to run their campaigns. So how much voter fraud do you think is going to get prosecuted by the local DA? But I can also see where it could also be a problem in a very, very, very small county where there's a very few lawyers. There's a DA, there's a judge, there's lawyers that practice. I could also see a situation where it's not prosecuted in a very, very small county because of the good old boy system and everybody knows everybody, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they not only struck down the Attorney General's ability to prosecute voter fraud, they declared it unconstitutional. So I think it's going to take a constitutional amendment to modify that. I don't understand. The original ruling was from a case from 1951. So they overturned a 1951 case. I don't understand the legal reasoning behind that ruling. To be honest with you, I don't understand why a DA and the Attorney General can't have concurrent jurisdiction to prosecute voter fraud in the state of Texas, especially when you're dealing with federal or statewide races that affect the entire state or the entire country.
Well, and I think that, at the heart of the decision is really, we in this country and in the states, particularly in Texas, obviously feeling like we were a country before we were a state, we've still maintained that mentality, right? Which is, states' rights. And in that states' rights argument is local control. And I really feel like the Supreme Court, I shouldn't say the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals looked at this and said, hey, you know what do we feel is at the heart of the Texas spirit, right? The Texas political environment, legal environment. Do we want Big Brother watching over our shoulders, or do we want to be able to deal with issues at the level at which they're happening? And the challenge becomes, to your point, Bryan, who do we trust? Right. So Texas is a red state. And by red state, I mean they are a solid Republican state, voted that way for a long time. They transitioned early in, I guess, like the late 70s, but just know that Texas is a very conservative political state. But there are little bastions of these blue democratic cities, right? So wherever there is large populations, urban areas, there is still a swing, right? It can be Dallas, it can be maybe Houston, it can be maybe Austin, but the majority of the state is rural and very conservative and Republican. And so I think what the Supreme Court, what the Court of Appeals was looking at was really saying, who do we want to deal with this issue? Do we want it to be done at the local level where people are actually going to be more inclined to want to police themselves and their people, right? Do I want to police my neighbor? If my neighbor is perpetrating fraud and trying to affect an election, is it important to me, or is it important to somebody who's sitting at the Capitol building in office at Austin? Well, I think it'd be more important to me because the person who is going to actually make decisions that are affecting me on a day-to-day basis is the person who's freaking perpetrating that fraud where I live. Where if you talk about the office of the attorney general, like you and I both know, this is a freaking office that, you know, I'm going to say that that office flies like the flag above the Capitol building. And so whatever direction the wind is blowing, that freaking office is going to chase tail about it. And so if they feel like it's a border issue, guess what? They're going to speak up, because that office is a launch point for what, Brian? If you're the attorney general of the state of Texas, what do you have your eyes probably set on?
Well, usually if you're the attorney general, probably the governor's mansion would be the.
Hell yeah, you're looking at, I want to be a governor, or I'm looking to be a US senator for the state of Texas. These big offices, that is the launch point for that. And that's why it's such a political flag. That's why they, they pick up the mantle along all these things, why they're so willing to engage in lawsuits against the federal government to try to stop exactly what we're talking about. The federal government's hand reaching down and controlling what's happening at the state level. And I really feel like that's what the Court of Appeals was doing now. They looked at it and said, hey, you know what? If we're going to stay true to what we believe in the state of Texas, which is Big Brother shouldn't be watching us, we should take care of our own shit. I think that's what that decision came down and is trying to say. But the problem is exactly your point, Brian. It's a very politicized issue. So if you're looking at it and going like, I'm a Democrat, and the way I keep my Democrats in office in Houston is, hey, let them do their freaking voter fraud and let dead people vote or freaking illegals vote, because you know what, they're casting, right, they're casting their vote for my boys downtown. Am I going to prosecute it? Hell no, because I'm part of that old boys club, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans in that situation. Depending on your geographic location in the state of Texas, that's going to vary. And so that's really the challenge. I agree with you. I think it leaves it wide open for disreputable individuals to continue to perpetrate fraud on the voter system, which is very sad. But I also think that it's really kind of one of those issues that I don't know that we're ever going to get that solution other than at the local level where people, it matters to them.
And I get what you're saying about the local control, but here's the deal. I mean, the DAs in Texas, I mean, if you don't know, I mean, you know this, but I mean, for our listeners, the DAs in Texas have a tremendous amount of power. A district attorney has a tremendous amount of power to decide what gets prosecuted or what doesn't get prosecuted. A good example is the Dallas County DA. I guess they're not prosecuting theft under $750, right?
Yeah.
So they've just decided that we're not going to do anything about it. So Rob,
they're taking a page out of San Francisco, man. They're taking a page out of San Francisco.
Take what you need to take, under $750, but that has a cost. It has a cost to businesses. It has a cost to people. But the problem is they have such a tremendous amount of power. And then take my hypothetical of the small town. If the small town DA is corrupt and the people that get voted into office are corrupt, there's nobody to challenge that. There's nobody to prosecute that. There's nobody to deal with that. And I think that case, the one that was at the Texas Court of Appeals, I think it was out of a smaller county, if I remember correctly.
I think you're right.
Chambers County, maybe, or I don't remember what county, but don't quote me on that. But I think it was a smaller county. It wasn't out of a Harris or a Travis or a Dallas or a Tarrant or anything like that. It was a smaller county, and there was a voter fraud issue, and then they declared the law unconstitutional. But I really think that's a place for a concurrent jurisdiction if you just want to have a check and a balance, because you can get with and maybe this is a larger conversation about where political money comes from and who's allowed to form PACs and donate money. That's obviously a large, and there's a lot of money coming into politics now, and a lot of money coming into these local races. And $1 million in a local race is a big campaign contribution. But if that sways what crimes you're going to prosecute, maybe you do need that check. Maybe you need that attorney general that's going to check is going to be a check and a balance against especially things that affect statewide elections or even national elections.
Well, and I think what the court was also trying to do is basically say like, hey, AG, if you're going to go after something, go after corruption. You absolutely haven't lost the authority or the ability to prosecute corruption cases. What we're saying is we don't want you to get, tied up in the minutia of voter fraud. Voter fraud is something that needs to be dealt with at the local level, because that is a very local specific issue. Now, I think I don't think that they completely barred, like, let's say it was statewide, because one of the things I do want to touch on that we had kind of discussed back and forth is digitizing the voter system. Okay. Now,
I have my opinions on that, and nobody's going to like them.
well, and you and I both, right? So this is the trend. The trend is, hey, yeah, there's a paper ballot, but we're not going to really focus on the paper ballots anymore. We want to digitize the system. Well, I'm going to tell you right now that anything is digital can be hacked. Period. So I don't care what anybody freaking tells you.
If
If
it plugs
it's digital,
into the wall, it plugs into the internet, it can be hacked.
it can be hacked. And it can be hacked remotely. It can be hacked by cell phone. It can be hacked by freaking, somebody across the world. And so trying to say that we want to digitize this, but don't worry, we've got a backup system that's a fail safe if we ever need to, is a travesty. And I think that's the thing
it's a train wreck waiting to happen.
Yeah, and it's happening. It's this slow train wreck that we're all watching happen, and we're like, damn, that's gonna be terrible when it happens. Wake the fuck up! It's happening right now. Like, you're watching it literally happen. And if we allow that to continue to go forward, I'm not saying I know the solution. I'm just saying that allowing it to go unchecked without any type of security, without any type of oversight, allows for manipulation. I'll give you an example. And let's take it as a statewide election. If it's all digitized and it says, hey, guess what? We're going to write this super complicated algorithm that's buried in a backdoor that no one can see, that says every 15th vote, okay, we're going to swing it from Democrat to Republican. Every 15th vote, okay? Of the millions that happen, when you look at an election, and our elections have been wicked close, not just our presidential elections, there's plenty of primary elections where you talk about the difference between candidates, somebody who actually knows what the fuck is going on in the system, and somebody who just has a good last name that they think we can fool a bunch of dumb voters by getting them to vote for a last name, whether it's Bush, whether it's freaking, whatever.
Bush, Clinton, there's a lot of last names.
Whatever your last name is that you think, hey, you know what, it's got some currency all by itself. What ends up happening is, if that algorithm, if we can't identify it, and if you believe that there's a fail-safe ability for us to be able to just identify those, because, hey, guess what? We'd be able to see if it's being hacked. There's a reason that there's all these security updates to your damn phone. All right, I don't care what phone you have. There's a reason that they're constantly doing these security updates, and it's not because your phone is freaking secure, or that the data is secure, or that there's not all these people trying to figure out backdoor ways to manipulate the system. And so I feel like when we're talking about the context of the conversation, which is an OAG, an attorney general of a state looking at voter fraud, I'd much rather them be looking at, hey, the integrity of the voter system, as opposed to going down and saying, hey, did Joe Henry, who's been dead for 10 years, vote in the local election? Now, if there's 100,000 Joe Henrys, because all the dead people in the state of Texas have risen from the dead to vote, yes, the Office of the Attorney General should be involved, but those DAs should still be involved. So I agree with you that concurrent jurisdiction, but I think there's a level there that we're missing, right? Like, it needs to be not the micromanaging of these situations, but the macro is really what the Attorney General's office, and I think that's what they were trying to say in their ruling. But the effect of that ruling is to say no one's doing it. That's really the effect of it, and that's the.
And so I think you got Abbott's office, you got Paxton's office now, all filing motions for rehearing and filing amicus briefs and all this other stuff to try to get that ruling readdressed, which I doubt it will. So I bet you're looking at a special session of the Texas legislature to tackle that issue.
Well, our constitution's so freaking clear, dude. Like, in the state of Texas, we have just the simplest freaking constitution ever. Oh my God, it's like freaking hundreds and hundreds of pages, because we continue to do this. So yeah, it's a colossal mistake. But I would tell you, like, the warning that I have to anyone who's listening, and you and I both know that, brother, is that the voter system is inherent into our personal.
Well, I mean, you go down and I vote on you vote on a, I don't know, smart tech, or I don't forget what the name of the stupid thing is. I go down to the thing, I put my little, I do the little, turn the little wheel and vote for my candidates and push the vote. Then the vote goes somewhere. I don't know where it goes. I don't know if there's a paper copy that backs that up. I mean, you're relying on these people that work for one day a year as poll workers to get that right. And then the thing I noticed about all the cases that were brought around this last election were, well, if you brought it before the election, it was premature, right? You bring it after the elections, it latches. It's by passage of time. So, you know, unless the lawsuit's going to trial on the day of the election, I don't know you're going to be able to get anything done. I mean, I think that's the courts punting the elections, and I don't believe courts should be deciding elections. Let me get that out. But I do think that there has to be a check and a balance, because this thing has gotten way out of hand. And I 100% agree with you that we're putting a lot of faith in machines that can be, you know, that can be hacked, that can be, you know, manipulated. You know, unless you look at every vote, every paper, everything turns into a paper ballot, and you can look at those paper ballots, you're not going to be able to verify the integrity of the election. I mean, and Texas has a history of you know, voter fraud in elections. I mean, look at old landslide Lyndon. I mean, everybody that gave Lyndon Johnson the last few votes he needed to win that election in, I don't know, 47 or whatever it was, all came in alphabetical order from the order that they were in the phone book. Can you believe that? Right before the polls closed, all these people came down in the exact order that they were in the phone book and voted for Lyndon.
Well, and that's the great point.
Lyndon.
Exactly, and that's the absolute best point in this whole conversation, Brian, is that if we believe that there wasn't fraud in relation to the voting system before we digitized it, you're an idiot. If you believe that just is magically going to stop because we're digitizing it, you're an idiot. Like, these systems are ripe for manipulation. They always have been, and they always will be. And so if we value our vote, which I know every free American does, you believe that casting your vote should matter, whether it's one vote, a million votes, every person's vote should matter. And here's the thing, you don't want it changed. I sure as hell don't want my freaking vote changed to somebody that I freaking hate. No, you don't want that. You want your vote to stay what it is. But if we don't, as a society, as a state, as a local entity, really look at that process and value it and get involved, it's going to continue to be what it is right now.
And I'm a firm believer
questionable.
I'm a firm believer in every vote should count, not just my guy or my lady's vote. Every vote, every legally cast vote should count. Not every vote that counts, because not all ballots cast in an election are going to be legal ballots.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you have somebody bringing down 10 ballots and trying to throw them on the pile or whatever, I mean, obviously, no. Every legally cast vote should count. But the problem is, everyone talks about being denied the right to vote over here. But what about vote dilution over here, where you have 5 people vote for the other candidate, and so my vote doesn't count because 5 people voted for the other guy.
Oh, gerrymandering?
No,
what?
Vote dilution.
But look, how does that happen? Yeah, by setting up districts, right? I mean, by the way that's the challenge, Brian. You're absolutely right. You're diluting that vote.
5 fake votes counter, if you and I vote for the same candidate, let's say, and they come in and throw 5 fake ballots in there. Well, our votes are gone. It doesn't matter what we voted for.
You're absolutely right.
They win by 2.
Exactly.
Or 3.
Exactly.
Sorry, they win by 3.
Well, and there's so many different ways that this is happening. Not just are we creating this, fake digital ballot, potentially, who knows? Are we creating fake paper ballots? Are we getting people who are alive to vote as dead people? All that stuff is happening. If you don't think it is, freaking, you're asleep. But we're trying to adjust for that in the geopolitical world, through the policies of, like, hey, redistricting, right? Like, how does a population shift? And it's a really big issue. It's a really big, complicated issue. But just know that if you want your vote to matter, you're gonna have to get involved and educated about this process. And I'm
gonna throw you one better. I think you need to go down and take your time and volunteer to work the election.
My point exactly, brother.
Part of your civic responsibility should maybe sign up and go down there and work the polls, because half the time these poll watchers or half the time those positions go unfilled, and 95% of them that nobody even bothers to go down there and vote, or go down there and work the polls. I mean, usually you have little old ladies down there working the polls, just trying to get out.
Daughters of the Confederacy, man.
Daughters of the American Revolution, whatever it is. Go down there, trying to do their civic duty. I mean, maybe it's time that citizens take, if you believe in your civic responsibility to do various things, one of those things is participating in the voting process. So So yeah, no, that's my thought on it. But like I said, I believe in, it's funny is the European countries and stuff like that, they've outlawed things like machines, and I think Canada outlawed machines. It's all paper ballot, and it's all paper ballot, and they've outlawed voting machines and mail-in ballots and all this stuff where fraud's rampant. And I also think the thing is interesting is 2016, the machines and you got Elizabeth Warren, Hillary Clinton, everybody complaining about fraud in the machines and fraud in this and Russian interference and this and that, and elections illegitimate. And Democrats win in 2020. It's the cleanest election of all time. And then you got the Republicans who are saying the election's clean in 2016 are saying the election's dirty in 2020. So,
Yeah.
I know that you have no republic without the integrity of the vote. I know that. So
That's for sure.
if you can't have an integrity of the vote, then you have no republic, and that's the scary thing about all this. All right,
No.
so this is another one. Let's get off to the heavy topics and go to a lighter topic, like Joe Rogan and the Spotify controversy. I know that's been going all around the airwaves. You got just to give a little background, you got Joe Rogan, who came up with essentially two episodes. One with Dr. Malone, who has 9 patents, and he created basically the precursor to, I guess, the mRNA technology that's the basis for the COVID vaccine. And then he also had Dr. Peter McCullough, who is a world-renowned cardiologist who's authored published more papers than any cardiologist in the history of cardiology. So he had those two guests on, and they talked about, some questions and concerns that they had about the COVID-19 vaccines and things like that. And so then you get Neil Young involved, and Neil Young is, a rocker from the 70s, decides that he's wants his music taken off of Spotify because Joe Rogan's on Spotify if Spotify doesn't get rid of Joe Rogan. So Spotify, I guess, got rid of Neil Young because apparently Joe Rogan, every time he publishes a podcast episode, it's the equivalent of Taylor Swift dropping an album on Spotify. So he gets like 40 million listeners, and then cable news jumps in the mix. And then you got, I guess, I read today that Meghan and Harry are getting involved. They may want to be taken off of their podcast, off of Spotify, even though they got 20. The funny thing about Harry and Meghan is they got 25 million for their podcast on Spotify, and they've done exactly 30 minutes of podcasting on Spotify. So is that roughly a little less than $1 million a minute?
That's pretty good, boy. That's good return on investment of time. That's for damn sure.
That's a good gig. But they're getting into the mix. Other people are getting in the mix. They want Joe Rogan canceled or censored or whatever the hell. Now Spotify's gotten into the mix and decided they're going to put a warning label on their podcast about if it's if there's a controversy.
Information.
Yeah. And look, I mean, look, I'm all for different points of view coming out. I mean, the science obviously is not settled, and that was one of Rogan's points was, hey, look, stuff that would have get you canceled 6 months ago for COVID misinformation. And I think he cited the example of somebody said like early last year or whenever it was 6 or 8 months ago that you could still catch COVID and still transmit COVID even if you've had a vaccine. Wow, that was heresy, and that was whatever, and people were getting thrown off of Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and for spreading medical misinformation. Well, apparently it's not medical misinformation anymore because it's fact now that actually does happen. So, I'm all for all points of view and letting people make their own decision. I mean, I don't understand this whole why the cancel culture has to come out for people. I mean, I don't really care about Whoopi Goldberg's comments. I don't think she ought to be canceled just the same as, I don't think Joe Rogan ought to be canceled for, having two doctors on and hearing their opinion. I mean, I don't get it. I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Well, and I think, when you talk about the Constitution, right, our constitutional right to free speech, our constitutional right to have our own independent thoughts and express them in the mediums that are available to us. And in this digital world, that's a lot, right? That's not just a podcast or, a YouTube channel or video, and when you talk about censorship of those opinions, it's difficult because I will tell you, let's take ivermectin. I know that, that's really where the controversy with Joe comes from at its heart, right? He got COVID. He took some controversial treatments that worked for him, and he came back and said, holy crap, like these things work. I mean, he touted them to friends, he touted them to coworkers, he touted them on his podcast. And so there's this huge community that says, oh my God, you're basically poisoning people's minds, are going to go out and kill themselves because of what you say. It's not like Joe Rogan is sitting there saying, I'm the chief surgeon, or the head of the CDC, and I'm telling you to go do this. This is a dumbass freaking MMA commentator who used to be a terrible comedian, right? Who's freaking but he's funny as hell, and he's got this huge following based on the career that he chose, and that he wants to say that.
I think his attraction, I mean, honestly, I think his attraction is he doesn't claim to know everything. He's an inquisitive person who asks questions. So he asks a lot of questions. He has a conversation with people. And I think that's where the appeal is, because he has all types of people. He has people that talk about aliens on the damn show.
Agreed, because that's who he is. That's Joe Rogan. And he's this character. He's a little larger than life. He's like a cartoon character on this. If you've ever watched UFC or followed him, as far as the way he does his comedy, it's raw, it's rough. It's, it's just kind of who he is. And so that he's saying something doesn't mean you need to go do it.
Right.
Can you listen to it? Can you entertain it? Can you research it yourself? Yeah. Should you? Absolutely. Does that mean that what he says
I have with it is
censored?
Okay, he was prescribed ivermectin by a doctor, and then obviously that was after consultation with his medical professional, who examined him and figured out the best treatment course for him based on what he wanted to do and based on what his body could handle. I don't think that CNN coming on and calling it horse paste and saying he's telling everybody to take horse dewormer, which it is used for horse dewormer. But it's also got a lot of these medicines have human uses and animal uses. There's a lot of overlap. That's if what he's saying is medical misinformation, then that's just as much medical misinformation, because there are people that this treatment has helped. So my problem, I guess, with this whole thing is, look, everybody's fallback position is Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, whatever else. They're private companies, so they can censor whoever they want. No, yes, they can. Yes and no. But okay, the larger sense is, back in the old days, you could go to the town square and you could say whatever the heck you want. You had the free speech rights to go ahead and say it, and I guess you still can. But nobody goes down to the town square anymore. The town square is the town square. Nobody goes down there anymore. The new town square is all digital. It's all online. That's the new town square. Facebook, Twitter, whatever other social media platforms are out there. That's the new town square. They have Section 230 immunity from prosecution because they're immunity from lawsuits based on what the content is. They were given congressional immunity, from lawsuits. So they can publish. They should be able to publish whatever they want. And I'm all for. Look, the right information is going to be ferreted out. What I don't understand is that, and this push has been coming in the last year and a half to 2 years, or ever since COVID started, really. Everybody's opinion gets drowned out, and then these are the set of facts. This World Health Organization or the National Institutes of Health, or these people say the fact. These are the facts, so they're the facts. And no other doctor who's treated anybody or anything like else can have an opinion about anything, because those aren't the facts. Those aren't the facts. Well, the facts keep changing as this virus mutates and changes. And, different things happen. I mean, this Omicron variant the vaccine doesn't seem to work on the Omicron variant when it worked on the other variant or the other COVID, because the virus is mutating and the symptoms are mutating, and there's changes happening all the time. I'm always a believer of the truth eventually ferrets itself out, and you keep censoring people, and then people just want to know. I'm going to cut these people off of Facebook. I'm going to ban. Malone got his Twitter account suspended and he's a doctor. I mean, give me a break. Okay, fine. Somebody will come on and refute him. If what he's saying is wrong, if what McCullough is saying is wrong, there's a doctor out there. There's a lot of smart people out there that will come on and refute him. And I'm I'm the type of person that likes to look at, okay, I got this information over here and I got this information over here, and I weigh it and evaluate it, and then I make my decision. I mean, that's ideally what it should be, but we seem to be in this culture where somebody expresses an opinion that you don't agree with, get rid of them. They got to be gone. They got to be gone.
Yeah, I think it's, well, I think it's a little deeper than that. I think that I think you can go back to, the history of this platform is that, people have decided that the digital media that entertains them or that they draw their news from is 100% accurate. And that's just stupid, but it's the way a lot of people think. And so what has become, I'll use, let's say you're talking about Sandy Hook and it didn't happen. That's a hoax. Or you're talking about COVID and you're saying that's a hoax. The virus, it doesn't kill people. It's just stupid. It's just somebody, disinformation. Or you take it to race and you say, hey, you know what? It's actually Black people in the world or Hispanic people or white people that are doing these things. They created this virus. They're Chinese, and Chinese Americans brought it from China and they disseminated it in the United States. And so what ends up happening is, because the nature of this medium is it's uncensored, raw, pure, and immediate. Meaning just like us, right? We create this podcast, we put it out into the netherworld. And if somebody gets it and they're like, oh my God, Bryan's like a god and everything that Bryan says is true, and anything that comes out of his mouth, I'm going to do and believe. You censoring Bryan doesn't change the moron at the other end who is believing what he's hearing. And that's really what the Constitution, in my opinion, was designed to do, is to protect us from the morons of the world who, if they're sheep, they're always going to be sheep. They're going to be led by whoever it is that's a shepherd that's going to point them in a direction, whether that's a wolf or a shepherd, right? And the challenge with information right now in the digital world is no one can really trust the truth or veracity behind it. Why? Because it's constantly evolving. It's like this virus. It's constantly becoming something different, and it's not static. If you believe that the truth is static, you're an idiot, because the truth is like an onion. It's got multiple layers and it's got perspective. Perspective sways that one way or the other. Somebody's truth is somebody else's misinformation or lie because of what they've experienced, because of their perspective. But to your point, Bryan, it does ferret itself out. Through all this information, we find out that Sandy Hook did happen. We find out that COVID is a freaking virus that does exist. We find out the science behind these vaccines and their effectiveness and whether or not it's going to mutate and whether they'll remain effective. Do you know what I'm saying? We're going to learn all those things, but that doesn't discount somebody's ability to have an opinion on it or to be able to express it, even in this digital medium that allows people, whether it's Joe Rogan or somebody else, to get this information and believe that it's the gospel truth. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not static.
I guess what I have the biggest problem with is you have the White House press secretary coming out saying that Spotify or some other medium, it needs to do a better job of censoring people. And then the company is taking, oh, okay, well, the White House said I should censor this person, so I'm censoring them. So it's not the government acting against your free speech, it's the company acting against your free speech. But on the marching orders of Jen Psaki, who says Joe Rogan's a problem, because even though the stuff that's coming out of her mouth is a lie, half the time.
Let's flip it backwards. So let's take the 2016 election, right? So you go back to that and you say, hey, okay, or take the election before. When you talk about, is there disinformation? Is there intentional disinformation? Are people using it as a medium to try to push sheep in a direction? They absolutely are. They absolutely are. To sit there and say that Joe isn't trying to push something that he believes, that he experienced, he absolutely is, because he's got that perspective and experience. And if you want to take it and politicize it and say, hey, if I'm a party on the other side, or I'm a Russian freaking hacker or Korean hacker, and I'm sitting back there and my government's telling me, hey, put information out to detract against one candidate or the other, is that happening? Yes, it's happening. Our right wing, our Muslims, our Catholics, our freaking Protestants, our athletes, everybody's doing it. And so it just becomes, as an individual, on my part, you have to bear some responsibility in this social digital generation, which is, if you're going to believe everything that you hear, you're going to pick a side. That's who you are. That's what you've chosen to do, and the Constitution allows you to do it. Now, if you're a private company and you're going to bow to political pressures from somebody who's above you in the federal government that says you need to censor this, well, hey, look at Facebook or Meta or whatever the hell you want to call them now. All of a sudden they're like, hey, I'm not going to allow these ads to be up because they're disseminating information that's not true against a candidate, against a person, against the country. What are they doing? They're absolutely acting as a government entity on censorship because
or
it's
they're
privatized.
acting as an editor, which they're not supposed to do under Section 230.
Right.
So,
but here's the deal. Here's the deal on that, brother. Like, I think that you can't get around it. I don't think there's a way to get around it because it's going to be one side or the other. If you let it be a free-for-all, the problem with the free-for-all, in my opinion, is that we have eliminated the sources of information at this point in our society, in our digital, in the world. We've eliminated those entities that we used to trust to gather information from, whether it's a printed book or a digital web page or a news media outlet or the federal freaking government. Look at it.
Are those people that we used to trust, are they worthy of our trust anymore?
I mean, that's the point. Yeah, because we've
so much
shown
editorializing that goes on in the news nowadays that,
brother, that's what we love about this digital age, is that somebody with a cell phone has become a media outlet. Hey, here's video. I live streamed it. This is exactly what I saw. Make up your own mind. Did they do it? Did they not do it? But the problem with those is now we've come to understand that everything can be manipulated. Let's go back to our freaking voting example. If in this digital age, there's one thing that you take away from this conversation, it's that anything can be manipulated. We as a people are constantly being manipulated in this digital age, one way or the other. You just have to be smart enough to penetrate it, to do your own research, to spend your own time and energy to figure out if what you believe or what you hear is the truth. And then you got to make up your own mind. Cast your vote, take action, do what you want.
A good example is my favorite college football team. Some guy came out with this story that said that they paid $30 million to these players for name and likeness, name, image, and likeness rights to get these 5-star recruits or whatever over to the school. And it was some random crackpot guy. And then all of a sudden somebody else picks up on it. Somebody else starts reporting it. Somebody else. And then by the time it gets over to the quote unquote legitimate news sources, there's reports now that A&M has paid $30 million, $20 to $30 million for players.
Yeah.
And wait a minute, you trace it back to the source, and there's some guy who doesn't know shit from Shinola who's pissed off that his team didn't get the star recruit. But when the snowball starts rolling, and I don't know what's going to happen with this Rogan thing. The snowballs just started rolling down the hill. I hear Obama's maybe pulling their podcast. Harry and Meghan going to pull their podcast, even though they don't really do one. You got Neil Young. You got
they're pulling music
Janis
catalogs.
Joplin, I remember the other one was Janis Joplin. I don't remember which one. Wants to pull her music off the. So I don't know if they're going to end up cutting him. They paid him a hell of a lot of money. I mean, honestly, I would hate to be a CEO right now of a company because it's who you're selling products to, who you're selling them for, all this stuff. I mean, this is absolutely a crazy world we're living in. You're getting pressure from all sides trying to sell a product. I mean, Spotify probably just wants to put their shit out there and make some money off of it, but they're getting pressure from all sides.
Yeah, no, it's the digital world, and we've talked about it a couple different times. But this is one of those situations where it's a mirror reflection of the macrocosm of what's going on in our society. It's extremely polarized. It's extremely politicized.
A lot of people don't understand that and I don't know if it's just a lack of people learning their basic civics in government class in high school or what. But the purpose of the First Amendment is to protect the speech that you don't agree with. That's what it's there for. I don't agree with skinheads or neo-Nazis or all that stupid shit. But, do they have the right to spout their propaganda? Yeah, just as much as I have a right to say that's complete crap.
Yeah, the counterbalance to that, though, has always been, at least in the Supreme Court side, is it cannot pose imminent harm to society, right? You can't yell fire in a crowded theater where people are going to get trampled and die. That's not free speech.
Right.
And so, when you talk about
it's the imminence of the harm. If you're you know, if you're actively persuading people to go shoot somebody and saying, pick up your rifle right there, so shoot those people, pick up your rifle, shoot those people. I mean, that's a different, not protected type of situation where it's going to cause an imminent harm to someone. Or
Sure.
trying to cause a stampede at a theater and a bunch of people are killed when everybody's running out of the, you know, out of the theater. Yeah,
Right. And I
that's
think
not protected. But, you know,
I think
somebody
that's
being
Joe's
able,
problem, though.
somebody
I
to,
think that's what they're
somebody
trying to use with Joe, is
somebody
to
saying
say, hey,
vile, stupid shit, you know, is unfortunately is protected.
right. But I think that's the issue with Joe specifically, is that they're looking at him saying, you're saying something that in our opinion, our medical professional opinion, is not true. And it's directing people towards something that is imminent harm, has potential for imminent harm. And I don't believe that that's true. I mean, if you're that moron, if you're that sheep who's going to just do everything that you hear, yeah, it is. But
But
if you're Joe
he's
Rogan
not
and you're saying, hey,
getting,
here's my opinion,
he
go
went
figure
and
it out for
got,
your freaking self.
he
Yeah.
went and got two widely known experts to come on there and talk about it. Are they talking about every specific case? No. Are they talking about every individual person? No. Everybody's different, right? But you get these, just the same as, you know, the experts over at the FDA or the CDC are saying one thing too. So, you know, it's not like he's just some guy on a street corner, you know, standing on a soapbox. He went and got two experts to have a conversation with and put it out there and said people can take it for what it's worth. Okay, fine. If you don't agree with him, get the counterbalance experts out there to come out and say, well, this is where he's wrong, he's wrong, he's wrong, and he's wrong. The problem is these fact checkers that they go get are really not fact checkers at all. It's really just, you know, it's just opinion pieces, and it's just, you know, it's academics or people that don't really have, you know, have the scientific background to fact check. And then is it up to the medium, Twitter or Facebook, to be the fact checker? Why should they be the fact checker? The Facebook shouldn't be in the fact checking game, really. I mean, in my opinion, I mean, Twitter shouldn't be in the fact checking game. I mean, put it out there, somebody else can come out there and say it's wrong.
Yeah. I think it's a counterbalance between individual freedom and this free speech element, and then the case rulings that have come out to say what is
that imminent harm. But if they're in the fact checking game, they're not publishers, they're editors, and that's different.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with you, which is, I think, interesting the way Spotify's thinking about handling it, to like put a label out that says, hey, yeah, we're going to put out and say, you know, take it for what it's worth. And if you want to fact check it, here's some websites to do your own research.
The problem I have with that is they're not saying that when the CDC wants to come out with their podcast.
Because, well, let's say they do it for everybody. I think it's got to be a universal policy.
If they do it for everybody, I'm cool with it, but they're not saying that. They're only saying that on the you know, on the podcast or whatever that the medical establishment or the big pharma is going to disagree with, we're going to put a warning label on. To put a warning label on everything, and I'm cool with it. But
yeah, but that's not what they're doing.
No,
I'm with you 100%. But that's the kind of pressure that's going to come from us, right? The individuals, the society, the states, you know, that we look at it and say, well, that's bullshit. Like you let us make up our own mind, give us all the information. You know, I would love to tell you that.
Twitter's a great example. They've spent about the last 2 years, you know, throwing people off and, you know, for saying things, and their value, I think their value has been reduced by about half since Jack Dorsey left. I mean, they've lost about half of their value. I think it went from 70 billion to 35 billion, which is still a mighty valuable company, but I don't think the stockholders of Twitter are going to be very happy about them losing that much money.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting balance for businesses, especially in the digital age, these digital medium businesses, whether it's social media
I'm telling you, brother, whenever there's going to be a court somewhere that's going to overturn that Section 230 immunity on a Facebook or on a social media outlet, and then the floodgates are going to be open. I mean,
it'll shut down companies, brother. If that does happen, I'm going to tell you right now, like, it's going to shut down. You know, it'll change from the digital age to something else. So, you know, whether we go back to the Stone Age with no digital, you know, content, I don't know, but yeah, it's definitely, all these things are interrelated. You know, what we're talking about is really, you know, geopolitical, societal, legal issues that are all intertwined, that are putting us in the situations that we're talking about right now. It's interesting how there's a thread between all of them.
Well, all right, man. I think we've killed this topic or these 4 topics, right?
Yeah.
So thanks for the time today. We'll come back next week. Well, we'll tackle more entertainment news. You know, oh, on a side note, on a celebrity side note, I mean, Brittany seems to be living her best life. I've seen
Hey,
her on
look,
Instagram a number of times. She's out in Hawaii. She's here. She's there. She's dancing around. She seems to be
brother,
living
we've
her
seen
best
more
life.
of Brittany. We've seen more of Brittany, literally all over Brittany in the last couple of months than we've ever seen of Brittany. And I thought we'd seen a lot of Brittany before. So, it's nothing. I'm glad. I'm happy for it. It is really kind of such an interesting topic that we touched on. But you're right. It'll be interesting to see how we handle her prenup / marriage / divorce in the future. So keep an eye out for that one.
All right, brother. We'll keep warm and have a great weekend. And thanks for the time again.
All right, brother. Talk to you soon.
All right.